Many times in a defensive encounter, the mere presence of a firearm can end the threat. Thanks to Wilderness Tactical Products for sponsoring today's video. Look for a link in the description for $5 off on the ankle first aid kit that I wear every day. Hi everyone, this is John with today's active self-protection lesson out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the United States. Here we're going to see a waitress who defends a fellow waitress from an incredibly violent and grievous bodily attack. News story in the description says the woman in red has been arguing with a customer in the store because he said his food didn't come out fast enough. And so he jumps then back behind the counter. He said he wanted a refund and they said no. And so he just decides to just drill her in the face. Now another employee actually has a gun, has pulled it out from under her apron there. And that guy decides he doesn't want to pursue. She drives him off. And thankfully that's where this one ends. The cops are still looking for him. Boy, I think she really did a great job of doing exactly what she needed to do in the moment. If you appreciate the lessons you get here at Active Self-Protection, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so that you get notified every morning when we post a new lesson. Out of this one, I want to think about escalating conflicts, particularly between the first waitress and the perp. I want to talk about when you can use a firearm, when a firearm can be drawn in a legal sense as well as a moral sense, and I want to talk about the standard of stopping the threat. So let's think about the first lesson here when we want to talk about being in a vulnerable population. If you know that you've just had an argument with some guy and that argument has gotten heated, you got to think about the fact that you got to go, I got to be aware of what's going on in my world. Now, of course, she still has a job to do, right? So she's back there getting stuff off the grill and all that, but you can't be unaware, especially when you've just had a verbal altercation, because somebody may want to escalate that verbal confrontation. It's exactly what happens here. Now, you notice that this woman is looking at this guy, but she doesn't take any defensive measures. Friend, if somebody who has been verbally confrontational to you, you got to manage that unknown contact and get your hands up to protect your head and your neck and to keep distance between you and take some steps away. I don't think she could have moved around this guy, but moving backwards to give her some more space would have been incredibly important. Now this guy's going to reach out right here and just absolutely drill her. And is this an objective, reasonable, deadly threat? The answer is absolutely. Women generally against men have an argument for disparity of force. It's much easier for a woman to argue that she had a reasonable objective fear of death or grievous bodily harm because a man is threatening to assault her, because it is so much more likely for that attack, even with empty hands, to do grievous bodily harm. And this woman suffered a significant concussion, which certainly meets that standard. And so therefore, these are the objective, reasonable standards to use deadly force. And so, could she have drawn a firearm before this? Well, she may have been able to draw a firearm, maybe not use it before he punched her, but to draw and to say, hey man, get away from me, I'll defend myself. Yes, maybe. Now our second, waitress here who draws a firearm, is this justified? 100%. If she had shot him in the moment, would she have been justified? I believe she would have, because again, in that moment with him having just punched this woman and pursuing her, he represents an objective, reasonable, deadly threat. That said, it was probably wiser for her not to shoot him. She had the opportunity to give him a verbal command here, and so she did. And because of that, he backed off. And so there are times, friends, when it's not just draw the gun and shoot, but it's draw the gun and command. You may not have time to do that, may have to use the gun immediately. But if you can give a command, it will cause you far less problems to draw a gun and present it and issue commands than it will to shoot someone. I guarantee you will face fewer emotional, fewer social, fewer legal challenges for doing that. So we have to recognize that, and you need to train that as well in order to take someone at gunpoint and to keep your distance and drive them off of you. Now, I also notice here that this guy is not super scared of her firearm. Now, he respects it, but he's not in fear of her. And friends, you got to recognize there are violent criminal actors. You draw a gun, they may not be afraid of it. It may not make them go away. And you have to recognize if you draw a gun, you must be ready to use that firearm to defend your life and those around you. Thankfully, this waitress was. Now, if you go read the news story again, the waitress who was punched is actually back on the job, but the waitress who drew the firearm, she quit that job. She said, nope, I've had it with this. Now, the restaurant said she was perfectly legal to carry that firearm, and so she was allowed at work. That's no problem at all, but she decided it was too much risk for her to be there. I don't blame her for that one bit. I'm grateful she was there that day, though, to protect her fellow worker and to cover her asp.